And are we going to in the future, are we going to reach this new capacities of connecting without words and to traveling with less physical needs and other ways of connecting?
I think so. I did an interesting, to me, project, also using hypnosis and in groups. I did progressions, going into the future, instead of regressions, looking at the past. Now with more than 7,000 people. And I take large groups of people progressing, going into the future to 3 time periods. About 100 to 200 years from now, 500 years ahead, and 1,000 years or more in the future.
You will explain me that in the next blog, okay?
In the future?
Yes, just the small future. En un minuto hablamos del futuro con Dr. Weiss. Thank you. Well, now we are in the close future, since minutes ago. We are talking about progressions. How can we do progressions, and what is going to happen in our future lives?
Yes, because as physicists know, time is not an absolute constant. Einstein was right. Time is relative, and at some point it appears that maybe it even stops or slows down or disappears. So when I regress these thousands of people, or progress them, I still put them into the hypnotic state, but then I take them forward and I say, okay, now you're going through a door into 200 years from now, or 500, or 1,000. And at the end they filled questionnaires. I wanted to see if there was a consensus. Did they agree on anything? And I found that the most consensus, more than 80%, more than 80%, agreed in the far future, the 1,000 year. They saw a world that was very green and idyllic, beautiful, without wars, without violence, without illness, and people communicating telepathically. That's what you were asking me. And yet the population was much reduced. Many people told me about the existence of desert museums. That is, there were no more deserts on the planet, so they needed museums to show what deserts were. I never would have thought of this concept on my own. But the people told me in the questionnaires, and I was surprised many people did. But very, very commonly that the population was less, many fewer people. And it appeared that that happened in the middle period, about 400 or 500 or 600 years from now. Something to diminish the population. But what it is not set yet. Still, there seems to be free will there. In the 100 years from now,
100 years from now,
to 200, it was more of the same. Nothing. I didn't find the cataclysm. The world doesn't disappear in the year 2012 or 2020. There are disruptions, but we always bounce back. And something in the middle period happened so, and we still have to decide what that will be to decrease the population. Eventually the world will be idyllic, beautiful. But that, more than 80% of people are describing that probable future. But is it benign what reduces the population? For example, to me the most benign way would be people decide to have fewer children because the planet doesn't need 10 billion people or 8 billion people. Maybe it only needs 1 billion. It can get along, use the resources better. The second most benign way is decline in the fertility rate. Maybe people can only have fewer children, not by choice, but because the fertility rate is diminished. This is already happening. By the way, already measurements are that the fertility rate in general is decreasing because of the toxins in the environment and other reasons. Or are we going to choose a more violent way? Wars, terrorism, plagues, illnesses, ecologic disasters, yeah. These can happen too, but Not for a while. We don't have to worry about this. Except if we've reincarnated 400 or 500 years from now, and now we're back and we're in the middle of this time. So my choice, since we probably will be reincarnating, and it will be us again and our soulmates, let's choose the most benign way. Let's just have fewer children.
Let's do it better. Let's do it in the best way.
The best way.
We'll meet again then, maybe, to talk about this.
Yes, but eventually we'll meet in the far future, and we'll say, what a beautiful world this is, how green. They describe people not living so much in cities, that cities have become smaller with much more green. And it's a simpler and yet very healthy way of life, and more meaningful. And still, diseases have been conquered. Industry is now taking place off the Earth's surface, outside. So there's no pollution here anymore.
How can we learn from children?
Well, children, to me, and I should say in the beginning that many children remember their past lives. We have thousands of cases of children without hypnosis, but spontaneously they remember past lives. But they tend to forget when they get to about 5 or 6 years old. So when they're 3 and 4 and 5, they're remembering, and then it starts to diminish and forget. Children can teach us because they remember. They
are closer.
They're closer. There was a book in English. It's called "Everything I Needed to Know I Learned in Kindergarten," because and it's a very interesting book because it talks about how did we act in kindergarten. Well, we held each other's hands to cross streets or for safety. We helped each other. And we can see in children a simpler life that's not deceitful, it's not dishonest, it's very basic. And to me, this reminds me that it's not so complicated to be an adult. It's not so complicated in this world. Maybe we only need 4 things, which I think are education, health care. I'm being a politician again. Education, health care, housing, and food. So education, access to health care, medicines, and shelter, housing, and food for everybody. If everybody on the planet had those 4 things, this would be a much happier place. Fewer wars, no poverty. I think we can accomplish this if we really put our will to it. Healthcare, education, housing,
shelter, yeah.
Yes, and food. So that we can learn from children.
It's so ancient.
It's so ancient. And what do children need to be happy? These 4 things. And they play. And we don't play enough. We get too serious. We get too complicated. And we only need those 4 things. But we worry so much. So children can teach us to see life fresh, alive, spontaneous. We can learn those things. Children remember their past lives, many children, so they can teach us about those things too.
And when children meet or talk about invisible friends, are they talking about this?
Sometimes they are, and sometimes they're very important. I remember a mother who got in touch with me. She lived in St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States, and she was upset because her mother had died recently. And she had a young daughter, a little girl, and this was the little girl's grandmother. And they were very close. But the little girl did not seem sad. She wasn't depressed. She didn't seem to miss her grandmother. And this was very perplexing and a little frightening to the mother. So what happened was that one day the mother couldn't take it anymore. And she asked her daughter, came skipping down the stairs from her room, which was upstairs. She said, "What's wrong with you? Don't you miss Grandma? Aren't you sad?" And the child said, "No, I was just talking to her in my room. She's sitting in the chair." And then the child told the mother details about the mother's life when the mother was a child that only the grandmother knew. So you knew it wasn't a delusion. She was getting this information. But the mother thought something was wrong with the daughter because now she's hallucinating, takes her to a child psychiatrist who wants to start the daughter on medicine. So then she called me up and said, should I do this? Should she start on medicine? I said, no. She's having this experience. It's helping her. It's important to her. And she told you secrets from your childhood that only your mother knew.
Don't lose that opportunity.
Don't lose it. And I said, if it worries you so much, just say, that's nice, dear. Just, it will stop after a while. And it did. She didn't take her to the psychiatrist. I'm not against psychiatrists. I am a psychiatrist, but not in
another way.
Normal.